So, our first party is Farouk, a final year law student who urgently needs convenient housing close to his university, but he's a very strict on budget. And our second party is Farah, a landlord who has faced property damage from students that rent her house before. Now could be said that she's very cautious person. So straight to the core conflict here was balancing Farouk's need for affordability and quiet enjoyment against Farah demands for maximum asset protection and strict default remedies. So, to prevent future legal disputes, we began with our agreement by clearly identifying the premises, followed by clause 1, definitions and interpretations, and then by legally labeling terms like the rent, the tenancy period, we eliminate any contractual ambiguity from the outset. I will now pass the floor to the next presenter, which is Mr. Linggi Lazarus, to discuss how we resolve the financial and deposit issue.
Alright, so the first issue, we focus on financial commitment and deposits to ensure fairness for both the landlord and also the tenant. So first, under clause 4.1, the monthly rent is 700 ringgit and must be paid on or before the first day of every month. Next, under clauses 3.1 and 3.2, the tenant pays an upfront amount of 2,450 ringgit. This includes the first month's rent, a security deposit of 1,400 ringgit, and a utilities deposit of 350 ringgit. So this deposit protects the landlord against damages and also unpaid utility bills. So finally, under clause 3.3, the deposit must be refunded within 14 days after the tenancy ends. Deductions are only allowed for unpaid utility bills or proven damage, while normal wear and tear cannot be deducted. This ensures the tenant is treated fairly. Thank you.
Moving on to issue 2, where we want to take a closer look at property maintenance and habitability. So in evaluating the dynamic between Farah and Farouk, our goal was to find a highly operational balance that protects the tenant from structural failures while safeguarding the landlord's assets. So we broke this down into 3 clear areas. First, the tenant's obligations. So under clause 4.4, because Farouk has exclusive control of the interior space, he is responsible for day-to-day upkeep, cleanliness, and minor interior repairs. However, he is strictly shielded from bearing any cost related to fair wear and tear. Second, the landlord's obligation. Under clause 5.2, Farah retains absolute non-delegable liability for the structural integrity of the studio, meaning the roof, main walls, plumbing, and pre-existing building defects are strictly her responsibility. Finally, the negotiated consensus. So to protect Farouk's privacy, while maintaining Farah's asset control, clause 5.3 guarantees quiet enjoyment, while clause 4.6 legally restricts landlord entry by requiring at least 24-hour prior written notice at a reasonable hour. So ultimately, by clearly splitting interior upkeep from external structure, this framework eliminates ambiguity and prevents minor maintenance friction from turning into major legal breaches. Now I'll pass on to the next presenter.
Next, I will explain issue 3 and 4, which are subletting and occupancy control. So under clause 4.10, the tenant is not allowed to sublet, assign, or let anyone else occupy the property without the landlord's written permission. So this helps protect the landlord's property and ensure they know who is staying in the house. At the same time, the agreement also protects the tenant's privacy by preventing any unnecessary or intrusive visits from the landlord. Overall, this clause creates a fair balance between the landlord's right and so to protect their property and the tenant's right to ensure they can enjoy a peaceful home. Thank you.
Moving on to issue 5, which focuses on late payment, termination, and statutory validity. In this tenancy agreement, one important issue is what happens if the tenant fails to pay rent or if either party wants to end the tenancy early. Under clause 6.1, the agreement gives the tenant a fair chance before termination. If the monthly rent is late, the tenant first gets a 7-day grace period. If payment is still not made after a written warning, then the landlord may treat it as an event of default and take further action. This protects Farah as the landlord, but at the same time, Farouk is not immediately removed without notice. Next, under clause 6.7, early termination is controlled by requiring 2 months written notice. If the tenant ends the tenancy early, a penalty may apply which is 50% of the remaining rent. This gives stability to the tenancy and prevents sudden termination without consequences. Lastly, the agreement is valid because it is governed by the Malaysian law under clause 6.16 and it reflects the basic requirements of a valid contract under the Contracts Act 1950, especially lawful agreement, competent parties, and lawful consideration. So overall, issue 5 balances both sides. The landlord gets protection against default, while the tenant receives notice, time to remedy, and legal certainty.
Thank you, Presenter 5. To conclude our presentation, let's look at the final outcome of this mutual negotiation. Through structured compromise, our group successfully positions to a completely balanced win-win situation. Farouk secures affordable private housing close to campus to focus on his final year, while Farah receives absolute certainty, secured asset protection, and legal stability. We have successfully produced a legally binding contract that respects the rights of both landlord and tenant under Malaysian law. Thank you very much for your time. Until next time.